Hey guys, welcome to the Warriors Path podcast. I'm Alan Baker, and today I am honored to have on board with me Coach Bob Berge.
Hello, hello.
I'm going to have Bob introduce himself here in a minute. Today we're going to be covering a topic is actually a question from one of the followers. And actually, I've got this question twice. This was one of the reasons why I wanted to go ahead and kind of touch on it. And in the C-Tac program, I have a principle that I follow, a mind tool that I follow to kind of help me find gaps in knowledge in my study in the combative arts. And it also helps me simplify what I'm doing because, if you study all the areas that are available in combative application, it's a lot. And not all systems do. And that's one of the things I want to make sure I'm doing so that it's one of the reasons for the combat blueprint. And so we're going to be kind of covering that topic a little bit today. So, real quick, Bob, would you introduce yourself and let the world know who Bob Berge is?
Yeah, that matters. I'm usually the behind the scenes person, and we've done many of the CSW podcasts. Alan and I have been partners for many years at this point. We've been doing the CSW Association together for over 10 years now, known each other. He was sort of a surprise sprung on me by Tanya Paulson at one point. There's a funny story about that we can do at some point.
Yeah.
How she sort of made that happen because uh, Alan came to us with the association idea, and I was skeptical of that because usually there's a lot of BS going on, but it was one of the best things that we ever did is partnering up because we ended up building a really nice association, and Alan has built many of them, since then. But yeah, great working with this guy. And relevant to the C-Tac stuff, I don't know much of that stuff. Now I've been around. I'm a martial arts guy too. Been doing it well over 40 years. But the tactical type of stuff, especially the civilian tactical stuff, because I'm not military or police, is really interesting to me. I don't own a gun right now. Lots of knives. I used to be a knife maker. All about the blades, but and I have some firearms experience. But I've been asking Alan questions recently about, I want to get the training guns and because I love grappling and all that kind of stuff, but it's very different when you start bringing firearms into the picture, and it's one of the weak areas of my game. So guys like this who have a lot of experience in it, I'm going to be picking his brain, as we go along, and I'm lucky because I get to edit these things, so I get advanced view on how to do it. But you still have to get your reps in. You have to get your mat time. You have to, go to the range and do those things. And this is going to be part of my journey in the next several years is learning those things because I'm not experienced in firearms and stuff. Just enough to not hurt myself, but I wouldn't say I'm well trained in it. So Alan's going to be one of the guys that'll be a resource for me. So I'm not sure that's much of an introduction to me, but it's something I'm interested in right now. So back
Perfect.
at you.
And I mean, it cues up what we're talking about today. So the principle that we're looking at is what I call the combat blueprint. And what the reason for putting it together. One of the first ones was to avoid systemization. And this is a term that I use quite a bit when I'm teaching. Sometimes different martial arts methodologies, you will go in and you'll study them. And if you're not conscious of it, they will systemize you. They will ingrain not only the system, but they'll ingrain the belief systems and thought patterns that are behind that art, sometimes without even your knowledge of doing it. And, after training for a little while, you'll find yourself stuck or limited in certain areas because of those belief systems. And I think that's okay as long as you know that's happening. And you'll hear terminology often in relation to these thought patterns. And one of the terms that I get a kick out of is all fights go to the ground. And to me, that's a systemized mindset because not all of them do go to the ground. But you, I've seen individuals who have trained in different systems, and they are bought and sold that that's the truth. And maybe you can make that happen, but it's not to say that there will not be an instance on the street at some point where it doesn't happen. So if you've moved forward in your plan and only planned for that option, then when it doesn't happen, you're not prepared for it. You don't have tools available. So, if you realize that, well, that I am being systemized, uh, and I'm okay with that, well, then wonderful. That's okay. I kind of want to avoid that. I don't want to be limited in my thought patterns and thought tools because of a belief system that is underneath a methodology. So that's one thing, is to avoid being systemized. Second thing for me is it helps me recognize gaps in knowledge. Because when I started to put the blueprint together, I wanted to pick out primal environments, and we'll talk about that. And when I started putting them together and looking, I go, oh, wow, I don't have information in that area. I've got to fix that. I've got to go find myself a mentor, a teacher, and say, hey, will you teach me? Will you give me information and knowledge so that I can start to teach myself? Because ultimately, that is what you do. You take command of your own self-education, and we gain knowledge and information from our mentors. So we have to choose them very well. So that's one of the things the blueprint did, was point out gaps in knowledge. And it does it in a really good way. There are several mind tools that I use that to this day point out, I don't have information for that situation. I got to fix that. The third area that it helps me with is simplification, because, when we start to look at the blueprint in a minute, there's different environments, and sometimes they're related to range. An example, firearms, edged weaponry, striking, pummeling. And it's a lot of information. If you choose to walk that path and go, I need information and knowledge in all of these areas because they potentially could happen in a exchange between two, three, maybe four human beings. Wow, how do I train that? Where do I find enough life to get that done? And if it's overcomplicated, if all of those areas are overcomplicated, you don't. You have to simplify it down to what are the fundamental, usable basics that work, and get really good at those. Um, Another thing too is, for me, it during that simplification process, it makes me gain more training depth, because part of the simplification for me is there's three areas that I want to make sure that I am studying. One is very common. I see it a lot in different curriculums and programs. Is just the access to techniques, technical knowledge. But there's three layers, three fundamental layers for me that I'll when I go through the filter, I challenge myself to make sure I'm getting. The second layer is attribute development, because a technique doesn't necessarily develop attributes, timing, optics, training your eyes in order to see certain things. Those things are important, and they add to your technical knowledge. The third layer is what I refer to as body state training. And body state training is the state you are in when you apply something. And to me, it's separate from attribute. An example of body state would be the level of tension or untension in the body anytime you apply something in a stressful situation. And that takes a level of trained control. You have to be aware of it, and you have to have training methods to get good at it. You have to be able to create environments that are stressful and put yourself in them and train having that level of control over your body state. So for me, all of that is part of that simplification process. And so, what is the combat blueprint? The basic one that I teach has different pillars in it. So the first pillar is going to be firearms. The second pillar, and you can look at this as ranges too, is edged or blunt weaponry. The next one in is a striking area or striking range. The next one in from that is generally referred to as pummeling. I like to divide it up into different areas. So I will say, for the sake of education, hand fighting, pummeling, giraffe wrestling, and clinch work. Of course, they all come together and create something. But as we know, when we are putting together our self-education process, if we can break it down and study the pieces and then put it back together, we're better in the long run. And then the next area is ground work. Now, we can always add more to this, which I have in the past. And I've got clients and students that are like, well, what about this? Perfect. You can put that in there. That is the fundamental one I use in the C-Tac program. And then, so each of those areas I refer to as a primal environment. So, what do I mean by a primal environment? To me, trained or untrained, the human machine will respond in these areas. And you can pull up YouTube videos and watch them. People don't have to be trained to throw a punch. And they'll, if they're placed under pressure, someone or some multiple someones are coming after them, they'll ball their hands up and swing. Now, is it going to be pretty? Most of the time, not very much, but it is a human reaction to violence. Now, if you're trained, obviously you look better. You could do a better job. Same thing with like edged weaponry. I've watched several videos in the last couple of months of individuals that were being arrested and going through the process, and they saw the opportunity to grab something that was edged on it. One was on a desk, one was in a seat of a car, and they tried to stab the officer with it. These guys probably never had a day of knife training, but it's ingrained in the human machine. It's primal. So some of the other areas that we could add may not necessarily be a primal thing. I always jokingly talk about death touch. That's not, it's not, you have to have training to do that. I don't call that a primal environment, and it could be on the list, but I choose the primal ones because these things are what boil to the surface under tremendous amounts of stress. When I'm playing games with the guys at the academy, we come up with all kinds of sick and demented ways to put ourselves under stress to see what happens. And it's not pretty. High levels of stress. You train for this many years. You kind of expect to do better, but you don't. And you learn a lot from that. And one of the things, we'll have different guys that'll come in and participate, and some of them are brand new. And it's really interesting watching how those guys respond. They've never been trained, but they still respond with these certain areas. So that's why we pick them. And that's one of the reasons why I call them a primal environment. So what we want to do is on these primal environments and these pillars is to make sure we have a baseline of training in each one. And like I said, for me, one of the gaps in knowledge, probably 16, 17 years ago, was firearms. When I started doing more work in law enforcement, military, the protection industry, I started getting more introduced to this. And it's a primal thing. People will see a gun and may not have a day of training. They'll pick that thing up. They know where the deadly end is. They might not be held in the right way, but they generally know what to do and they'll do it. So for me, that was a huge gap of knowledge. And, I'd spend many years studying martial arts, different things. And I hadn't done formal training in firearms. And growing up the way I did, it's not that I didn't get out there and play, but we're talking formal. I've got to find a good instructor and then do the work. Like Coach Bob said a minute ago, for me, in the last probably 2 years, I've rented an outdoor range once a month and spent the entire day on the range. And, it's not as often as I'd like because that's expensive. But I have seen a great amount of growth from it in that area. So that's one of the things that it did for me as far as showing my gaps of knowledge. And we talked about having to simplify it because if you look at it that way, you've got firearms, bladed work, striking, pummeling, and grappling. If I am overcomplicated in each area, I'm not going to be able to get enough actual training time in to be good at it. So I have to simplify it. I have to sit down, use my brain, and figure out what those fundamental basics are going to be. Because if you've studied anything for an amount of time, it gets simpler. And as you get better at it, your depth of understanding gets deeper. But, and one of the things you'll see too is you may not always recognize that simplification in some areas. Like for years, I didn't have the simplified application in bladed work. It was in my mind, it was very complicated. And so I had to actively go, well, I've got to make sure I'm simplifying this for myself. And I had to kind of force simplification. And then, I'll try it. Did it work? Did it not work? I'll bounce it off the guys, and I'd go through that ugly high stress test.
That's
Come
soul
out of it
crushing.
going, damn, this thing I've been doing for 5 years.
That's the soul crushing moment.
Yeah, it really is. Because, I mean, I know as a
Oh yeah.
lifetime martial artist, you spend years doing something. And you're
Oh
like,
yeah.
in your mind, it's going to work. It works in the drill process. And
Oh
then
yeah.
it's like, okay, today we're going to get out here in the parking lot between a brick wall and a car. And I'm going to grab two of my guys and we're going to go. And let's see what happens. It's
You
so
look like you
disappointing.
never did anything. Yep.
um, but it's those moments that I'll come out of it going, well, damn, this happened, that happened. And I'm got to where I'll record these things and I'll watch it afterwards and go, I've got to fix that. That little moment there, I don't have any answers for that. I've never even seen that. But I ended up in that position and I needed an answer. I didn't have it. I couldn't always fit it. I couldn't fit the violence into the framework that I had in my head. So that's what we had to fix is simplifying, finding those answers and finding truth. And get on my soapbox for a second. I think that's one of the tenets of being a true warrior is seeking it, recognizing it, and acting upon it. Putting yourself in those situations. It's not always fun. You put in a lot of time and you think, I'm pretty good. I don't test it. You get out there and test it with your guys, and even they're standing there going, dude, I got you.
Oh yeah.
That's reality, man. That's truth. But it has also led to great growth. So have you, I know you test with your guys
All the
quite
time.
often.
I
You
test
have
myself against myself all the time.
you have a bat cave
I
and
do.
yeah, you have willing participants that show up on a regular basis. Have you
Well,
seen the same thing?
yeah. Well, we had a convo about that yesterday. My training partner, Steve Braun, we train 2-3 times a week. In addition to our own training, I mean, we've been friends for decades. And we had that convo yesterday about it's relative to a podcast, one of your previous podcasts that I'm working on right now, you said something in there about people get caught in that trap of telling stories, and but you're not doing anything now. We're very much of that mindset, and you know from us being friends that in the last couple of years I've turned my life around quite a bit in the fitness area. I've become a runner and basically got caught in the trap of just sort of letting it go without realizing it, and then going, holy moly, I'm falling apart, that kind of thing. But back to your question, Steve and I had a little convo yesterday about it. I don't care if you're a 40-year instructor or you're a relatively new instructor or a new student. I respect the person who still gets on the mat or still spars. You don't have to get your brain caved in. You still need to do something though. You need to find the truth. Like, where am I? Like, for example, my running stuff. I don't have any delusions of thinking I'm a good runner. I do my best. I just did another race this past Saturday. I'm about middle of the pack, and I run every day. I'm really working, to do it. But I'm not one of those guys. It's like trying to get in the cage with a pro fighter. It's like, well, I know I'm not that. But that doesn't mean I can't look for the truth and do my best every day and try to find it. And so Steve and I, we really roll all the time. And it kind of sucks sometimes. He's hilarious because he's like, this really sucks. Like, I can't believe that because he's really good at C-Lot, and that's his area of interest. But he's honest. So a lot of the traps you get caught in, with putting the arm out and do like a demo on a whole bunch of techniques and stuff. It's like, but when you really are grappling against a resisting opponent, 99% of it just doesn't work. And I'm not just saying, I'm not picking on C-Lot at all. I'm not going to get caught in that trap, but I'm saying most things. Like, if you've got a resisting opponent, you're searching for the truth because, they might do anything. Like, his grappling has a C-Lot flavor to it because it's his thing. I'm CSW all the way because Eric Paulson's been my grappling instructor from day one. So my stuff looks a little weird. So, compared to, like, we have, wrestlers that come in with us, and we have some guys that are just jujitsu guys. My flavor of grappling isn't that, because Eric Paulson has everything in his. Like, he's got so many arts, but that's all I learned. I didn't really study anything else. Eric is my main guy. So I'm a CSW person. So there's all these blends of things, and it's really fun for us to get in there and go for it. But the bottom line is, does it work or doesn't it work? I don't care what the flavor is. And that's the truth. And we're talking about that, and I don't want to talk about the good old days, and that's fun. I like doing that. I tell stories as much as anybody else, but did I get on the mat today, or did I train today, or did I do something challenging today? It doesn't have to be, break your face difficult, but can I really do it? That's what I was mentioning in the opening about, I know that I don't have that competency with firearms. I haven't been tested like that under pressure. Like, could I really handle myself in a situation? Could I do it responsibly and not fall apart or make those mistakes? I'm not sure, because I haven't been tested. In these other areas, we do it all the time. I know I can handle myself in these other situations pretty well because we actually do it all the time. Like, we test each other. We really get on there, and it's like, well, no, I'm not going to let you do anything now, or I'm going to do this at a level where you can get some things. And we have these agreements and all the different variations of we like to do a lot of grappling because we're Thai boxers too and all that. But that kind of, when you start getting a little older, that starts breaking your body, and you don't want to get punched in the face as much or hold pads too much, for injury sake. But a whole other conversation. But so grappling, I do quite a bit of it these days. And man, grappling you become a truth machine if you wrestle all the time, because you're like someone could come in who's just big. He might not even be any good. He's just big and he's strong. And you're like, crap, like I've been doing this for 40 years and I can't do anything to him. Well, there's that. He's just big. That's a real thing. How do I deal with a guy like that? Some big, giant, strong guy? No, well, okay, well, I have to solve that. Steve's bigger than I am. So it's fun for me, to solve that, and get in and how can I get him? How can I solve that riddle? But it's truth. Some days, and then some days you don't do well. You might just feel bad. And like yesterday, we wrestled for an hour and then I ran 6 miles. And then during the run, I got about 3 miles in. I'm like, this usually doesn't suck this much. But so I'll jump over into something you said before about simplification. I've got something up on my board right here that I've been finding, stumbling on during my journey of just trying to be well as I get older, just trying to hurt a little less, just be healthier, eat better, not be perfect, just do a little better. It's easy and consistent. And that seems to be a thing that keeps emerging for me. If you make it too hard, you're not going to do it. Like you're going to get to a point where your willpower breaks and you'll either quit or you'll do less of it. It's doing that stuff every day. So if it's so hard that you don't want to do it tomorrow, you start dreading it, then you're probably going a little too hard right now for where you are. And I know I'm going to do one of these little episodes with Tanya. I had some conversations with Tanya Paulson about this, and we haven't found a way to articulate it well yet, but this keeps emerging because I started going a little too hard with my running. I was doing 10 miles a day. I was really starting to push it. I'm not quite there yet. Sciatica started kicking in and my knees started hurting a lot, and I started to drift into injury territory. And so that was too much right now. So I had to go back to my little easy and consistent. It's like, well, where am I right now to where this is still fun? So how do you make the hard things fun? Back to your simplification, I don't know all of your blueprint. I know a good bit of it because, I'm working with you, but you have it formalized and written that way. I'm sort of side door fuzzy finding my way into these things, but they're consistent with what you're saying. And if you can, and this is more of a life thing, like just self-improvement kind of life thing. But if you can kind of make it easy and consistent and it's a fun thing, you can sort of plug anything into that. Like, what are you interested in right now? It could be the gun area, which I'm getting interested in. That needs to be something that, okay, I can do it. Now, like I'll pick a thing, a drill or a thing in that, and I'll do it over and over and over and over and over to where it becomes pretty easy for me. And then there's the consistency part. If it's not fun, you're not going to do it. So I just think a lot of these things we do, I think that can be underneath it to where don't get discouraged, because some of this stuff can get really hard and you can get discouraged and you can get on the mat and get your ass kicked. And then you go, oh man, like this is starting to suck. Like I'm not enjoying this now. Eventually, if you do that too much, you're going to start like maybe missing some classes. You're going to start losing. It's like, this kind of sucks. This is sort of hard. I don't really enjoy this anymore. That's your signal that you're doing too much. You're going a little too hard. If you just back that down a little bit and and like embrace the suck, yeah, but because that's going to happen, but you got to keep that fun factor in it, and then you'll be surprised. It's almost like the more you try, the less you achieve. There's this weird paradox of you kind of stop trying and stop caring. You know, it's a little mental trick. It becomes kind of easy, and then you start doing more of the thing that you actually want. It's weird. It's try, don't try, and you get there. But if you start trying to force it and make that happen, I've just found that that eventually breaks. Where if you can sort of pull that little mental trick on yourself to where it's, oh, this is pretty easy. Like, I can't wait to do that tomorrow. Like that, I'm excited to do that tomorrow. You'll do it most days. If you can get that 5-6 days a week of practicing this, whatever thing, whatever area you're in at the moment, be surprised at how fast that curve goes up of that improvement. And getting on the mat is part of it. It's like, hey man, too much today. Let's go a little lighter. You know, we do that in the bat cave all the time. It's like, is this too much today? Okay. Some days you're feeling it. You're a little frisky and you're like, we're going to
Yeah.
crank it up. We're going to go today. And then, you know, if during that it becomes too much and someone starts to break, you back it off. And you can keep on going forever that way. And that's why old guys are still training. There's the truth. It's like, what are we doing today? I'm not really worried about what we did. We've got some fun stories about stuff we've done, you know, in the past. Like, man, do you remember that? Remember that happened? Yeah, cool. But did you train today? Are you fit? Are you trying to keep your body, you know, going as best you can, you know, today? Not being an elitist, oh, I can do better than you know, or I'm stronger than you, or I can run further than you. That you become kind of a butthead if you do that. You become this elitist jerk. It's not that at all. Anybody can do this. Like you can go walk, or if you can't do that, you can ride a bike. Find something to make yourself a little better today. Like do something. Just do something.
Some type of movement.
Yeah, yeah. I'm drifting a little bit and jumping all over the place, but I think this stuff's important. But my favorite part of your blueprint you were breaking down before is the simplification part, because it's kind of hard to take some of this stuff and make it simple.
Yeah. It's an active process. You have to have intent to do it. You know, and a really important thing, and to me, it's a major element on the blueprint too, is you work in your environment on a regular basis. So you grapple. And we mentioned the pillars earlier. You should have some type of resistance environment in each one of those. So rolling, pummeling, and hand fighting. You know, I used when I was commonly on at the academy on a daily basis almost is how many hours this week we would challenge each other. Did you get pummeling? And then how many hours did you get on your striking game? You know, did you kickbox or whatever it is that you choose to plug into that category? And then for me, a lot lately is knife fighting. And, you know, I've been forcing myself to get out there and do that more because I want to grow the level of skill and information. And then a funny story recently, I do a lot of work with a program with the Warrior Poet Society, John Lovell and Paul Perkison. So occasionally I'll get to go to one of their classes. And one of them is a pistol class. They ended the class with force on force scenarios. So you're out there with airsoft and running around vehicles and buildings and trying to shoot each other. And man, that's educational. It's like rolling with a gun. After I did that, I was like, you know, I'm buying some airsoft pistols because I'm going to get to the point where me and the guys or me and Jen, at least once a month, we're going to go do some force on force stuff because, you know, up to that point, I'd done all these classes, I'm training and gaining, doing the drills. And in my mind, things were working a certain way. I'm like, wow, if that guy does this, I'll do that. Well, that didn't work at
Nope,
all.
never does.
It was very eye opening. And I realized that, you know, I don't roll, quote unquote, enough with firearms. And that's a major element on the blueprint. So I'm like, I got to fix that. So I need to buy the tools and get the people that are willing to play the game.
I
And
want
you got
in
to,
on some of that.
it's coming. It's coming. We actually have a C-Tac camp coming up in 2 weeks. And we actually added 2 days to it. One day, because we've had a lot of growth, is just a lot of the new guys are coming in on phase one. And then the Monday after, we rented a range and we're all going to go out to the range and find out what we don't know, realize our gaps in knowledge.
That's such a great way to say it. Find out what we don't know. Yeah, that's so humble too. That's a humble attitude.
And too, something related is, yeah, you have to have a volume knob on those environments. That I get the term we have in the academy is I'm an extra today. I'm not going to be the star. you know, uh, you're just going to be one of the guys in the background, and that's happened to me a lot in the last year because of injuries and surgeries. It's like, I'm not going to be a shining light, but I'm going to be a body out there doing something. I might have one arm with a glove on punching you in the head. I'm going to try,
Damn right.
damn right. So, you do have to have a volume knob, and especially as you go farther along your journey. And that's a kind way of saying get older. Because like as you said earlier, I don't want to slide into the good old days category. Hey man, remember the good old days when? Yeah,
Nope.
if I utter those words, something's wrong. And
Yep.
I even tell the guys around me, if you hear me utter those words, you poke me that something's not right, because right now is the good old days. And if they're not, we need to fix it. So, and you don't get to operate at the same level you did 20 years ago, but you operate, you
Yes.
get out there and do it, you move. And, that's going to adjust more and more as we move forward on the journey. We just have to be intelligent about it. And one of the things that's introduced to me too, yeah, I call it the principle of timeless tools, is there certain elements that you'll realize are quote unquote timeless.
Hmm.
And like strength and speed would not be on that list.
No.
So you have to find out, you know, what is the timeless tool that replaces them? It might be skeletal alignment, unitary alignment of the body, which is just intelligent placement of the body. And you have to work on getting good at those things. What do I use now? And for me, I like to know what those are, because I was very fortunate that they got pointed out to me 20, 25 years ago. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to start getting good at that. And I'm
Yeah.
glad I did, because now it's all I've got.
Oh, yeah.
So, you have to actively say what are the timeless tools, and, how am I doing on developing those for the future? Because those are the things that still be around in the long run. It makes me think of Guru, Dan, and Asano.
He's the best example on the
Oh
planet of
man.
it.
And the one of the main people 25 years ago that was like, you should think about this. You should plan to make these changes in your life. I think he was the only person that told me that. He go, every 10 years, there's
Likewise.
going to be a change. And multiple changes. You're going to change over here, and this is going to change, and the way you think. And he was so
Oh, yeah.
right. And, credit where credit's due. Thank goodness I listened. Thank goodness I had a wise enough set of ears to go, well, I'll put some thought into that, because it's one of the wisdom pieces I've followed that allowed me to still be active today, even
Teacher
after
of
injury.
teachers, guru.
Agreed.
Yeah, I've heard that lecture many times from him. And now, I just turned 57. All the things he said 30 years ago are actually happening. He's like, you can get there with a skill. That's not the hard part. You can get there. It's maintaining it. That's the hard part. It's the maintenance. He goes, your body falls apart, your life changes, you're in different seasons, and different things happen. And he goes, and also even for instructors, like you get all wrapped up in taking care of your students, and then you fall apart. You forget about your own training. There's all kinds of different scenarios and things that happen. And Guru has been that guiding light for so many of us. I mean, thousands of us. He's I can't even say enough about him. I mean, that would be so many shows just trying to go. There's some stories for you of the influence he's had on the world, really, not just the martial arts part, but he's affected things. He's changed things for the better. But boy, he was right about every decade. It's different. Just like I said earlier, right now for me, it's become a health thing, because that's a form of, the warrior's path or being tactical as well. It's like, are you being tactical about taking care of your own situation, like your own mental health, your own physical health, because if you fall apart, you're not any good to anybody. You're like, what are you going to do? Or what if you really are needed in a situation? Are you physically capable of doing it? Do you have composure? Have you worked on your mind enough to where, or have you trained enough? That's one of the benefits of getting older. You have more composure. So less stuff rattles you. Hopefully,
Yeah.
if you've trained correctly, like things may happen, or just normal things in your life, you don't freak out as much. Like, you don't want to be the one who freaks out, Greg Nelson cracks me up. He calls it swatting at the bees. You can tell when somebody hits their threshold, like especially like they get punched in the face, they start swatting at the bees like that. Oh, there goes the composure. That guy's never been hit in the face. Like, composure went right out the window. They just start windmilling and swatting at the bees. But you don't want to be that in life. Where's your composure? Real quick, it's like, okay, here comes the OODA loop, let's assess the situation really quick. How fast can we, something's going down, orient, decide, act, you got to assess the situation. Okay. I think getting older, at least for me, that's a little better than it used to be. Never been like much of a freak out person, but still you get a little nervous, a little more of that when you're younger. Or a little more hot-headed. And these days, you start getting a little older, you're like, let me evaluate this before I decide to open my mouth, or before I decide to, jump in here and see what's going to happen. Let's, okay. And then who knows? Maybe, yeah. Sometimes it's go, but not always. But, take care of your finances, take care of your health, are your relationships okay? Another entire area of things, but they all matter.
Agreed.
Yeah. Are you doing well? Are you eating yourself into oblivion, just so you can emotionally feel better? I did a little bit of that during the COVID year, or year and a half or 2 years. I got to my all-time high weight, and that I had one of those moments of clarity. I went, what am I doing? I can barely walk around the block. This isn't me. This isn't. I've been doing this stuff most of my life. I went, what the hell happened? The world got weird for a little while, and then I got weird for a little while. I went, wow, I don't want to be like this anymore. And that was another thing I didn't know about myself. I was like, oh, okay, well, let's see what happens. And then we're on this journey. So I know the old guy thing comes. That's one of my little jokes, my little shtick, my OGT, old guy training. I put that all the time. But a lot of guys are getting kind of old now, so they kind of like it.
Don't say it out loud.
Yeah, it's like, well, hey man, we're not gone yet. We can still do some things. I just think it's helpful, and I like to stay, positive, because a lot of things we can do can go kind of dark. There's some dark stuff in there. But as a little bit of a shield against that, there's a lot of light too. It's one of the things you've mentioned that I never heard anybody else talk about, is being a Sun student.
Mm-hmm.
You create, and you bring some light, bring some positive. That doesn't mean you deny what's real. yeah, the dark is there. But I think doing these things can kind of help with that. And then if you have all of that stuff, it's kind of easy, kind of consistent. If you have that, you can go into these areas and really have a good time and train for your whole life. It's really good. And that's so my latest geeky thing that I want to get into is, like I said, I want to get me an orange gun and a sheath and put that on and go, how do I grapple with this and or keep him from getting it?
It
And
changes everything.
yeah, it's what I'm interested in right now. It's just there's nothing political about it. There's none of the other stuff. I'm a martial arts guy. I'm interested in these things. Like, how does that work? How does that one work? I'm probably going to do that for the next 10 years. It's and I want to go on the combat range, and I want to do with Keanu training for John Wick, going through that course, and he was really good at it. Like, it looked like he got really good at it. But and you've done all of those kind of courses. I want you to put me through those too. And I was like, but I'm not ready to do that yet. I still want to shoot paper targets and make sure that I can handle my weapon well and clean it and make sure the thing's pointing the right way at all times and I don't sweep anybody and do those kind of things. That's the level I'm at.
Oh, we'll definitely do it. Start to immerse you into the culture.
So apologies to your normal audience. I drift around a lot. Alan's a lot more focused. He's been trained, like he's focused on his things. I tend to drift around a lot. So welcome to ADHD podcast.
Information. It's been incredible, the response I've got. I did not expect it at all. So, all right. Well, that was the bulk of what I was going to introduce around the combat blueprint. Well, one additional area is, and I had a question on this too, is how we broke down each of the pillars. And each one can have a breakdown. And so the question was on the ground breakdown. So I divided up into subsystems of training for myself. It's just how my mind works. So in other words, the different things you can train underneath that pillar. And obviously one of them is grappling. And in the last 10 years for me, I've had to divide that into two parts. So, and I just nicknamed it EDC grappling because when I put the kit on, pair of jeans and a t-shirt, and I started grappling with the guys, and one of the submissions is they take their gun out and point it at you, or they pull your straight blade out and poke you with it. Start over. I had to start making changes. And so I would change a technique. But what I realized quickly is I had to go all the way back to the beginning for myself and change the way I was doing my basics, like the oompa, the shrimp. There's little changes I had to adjust because I had a holster on. And it made me go back and rethink and retrain a lot of that stuff. And then the techniques I was using. An example that I always give is one of the techniques we do in jiu-jitsu is we escape side and go to guard. If I'm trapped underneath someone, I'll generally try to escape that position and put them in the guard. The guard is when you have your legs wrapped around someone. And that's one of the first escapes I learned. And the situation was I was in a shoot house and I happened to be having an exchange with two guys. And the story prior to this is I was brought in to teach defensive tactics for a few days. So they had to tolerate me teaching and drilling them. So in their minds, afterwards, I found out it's our turn to pay this guy back.
That's so great.
And they did. They were just annihilating me because this is what those guys do. And I ended up on the ground. And so one of them dove on top of me and I ended up in the side control, and the other one came around and he's going to boot me in the head. And so I was under stress. I was winded because I'd been running around this shoot house trying not to die. And, you lose things, in those moments of high stress. You start to think with the puppy dog brain. And so my body took over. And what I mean by that is my nervous system reacted with what it had been drilling for the last 25 years, which was escape side and go to guard. So here I go. I put the shin in, I turn, and I pretty much was a table with a dinner plate for a belt buckle. And I gave this guy the gun that was in my belt. I just served it right up to him. So that example, that technique, great for grappling. But I had to come back and go, well, I've got to pick something else. I need something that takes the gun away from them, preferably behind them. And it also allows me to start leaving the ground. Sometimes as grapplers, we're sharks. We're in the water. I'm okay. I'll stay here, even if they're not have weight on me. A bad habit of mine is just I'm still laying on the ground and nobody's holding me down. So that's what I mean by that is if there's no pressure holding me, I'm going to start getting up. So I had to come back and change all of that. So that's why that division happened in that area. I train both, love grappling. But at the same time, when I put the kit on, it's an entirely different set of basics, techniques, mindset, habits. And for me, I've started doing those more even in my jujitsu training. I'll use those techniques and the guys, they don't even know why. They just go, well, that's Alan's favorite way to escape. But that's why I chose it, really, even if I don't have kit on. So that was the first subsystem. The second one for me is counter grappling or an anti-grappling. In other words, how do I cheat? If they're a better grappler, because that happens. So, you have to look at what they need generally in the arena of grappling. And then I go, how can I use those things to my advantage in a fight? Third area for me is ground fighting. If I'm down on the ground and they're not coming down to grapple like the individual that was just going to come and kick me in the head with a boot, he wasn't interested in grappling. How do I deal with that? How do I fight that guy? Or if someone is down and I don't want to go grapple, I still have to have a method of delivering destructive force. If I'm going to stay engaged in the fight, what is the answer for that? And to me, that section is ground fighting. The next section for me, under that, I refer to it as dog boxing. I borrowed that term from Chinese boxing. There's forms of Kung Fu that have a grounded version of ground fighting, and they called it dog boxing. So for me, the way I define dog boxing is out of position fighting. It's like if I am doing my Thai work and there's a certain way I'll stand, certain stance I use, I'll line up on my opponent. And so if somebody were to grab me and throw me on the hood of a car, and that's my training, and they start punching me in the face, under the stress, I'm going to struggle to get back to what I know, what my training is. So I'm going to try to get off that hood, get back on my feet, get lined back up. Well, the concept of dog boxing is you are always in position. So if you throw them on the hood, they know how to move. They know how to deliver destructive force in 360 degrees around the body. So they're not out of position. If I put them against a wall, in a corner, they're in a car for like a carjacking or something. They've studied those environments and they know the mechanics of fighting. That is the next section. And then the one under that is grounded weapons fighting. And I specifically say it that way because you'll see a lot of stuff that's just grappling with a gun. And I think you should do that. But this one is, I want to cheat. I don't want to just grapple. I've got guys in my academy that are like 370 pounds. There is no grappling with Big John.
Godzilla.
No. So, I have to achieve really the same elements that I have to achieve on my feet. I've got to gain space. I need to get a superior angle, and I'd like to be able to get to my weapon system ahead of time, like the old school gunslingers. First one's out. I need to achieve those things, and I can't necessarily do that while trying to grapple. So I have to have a methodology to achieve those things and get to a position to win, to cheat. If it is a fight, we're talking parking lot between two cars, glass on the ground, and there's two dudes. It's a bad day, but you want to train for those type of things, find answers for those things. So to answer the question, that's how I divide the column underground. And then I'll take that and I'll say, am I getting training in all of those things? And again, I have to simplify. Do I want to make sure, I am bringing it down to the simple basics, and then I have to go back and go, well, am I training in that environment? Am I putting in the extra time like Coach Bob just said? And you also can say, what are you training for? I'm very, I hate to use the term self-defense. I like to say self-offense orientated. I want to be prepared for what would happen if I'm at the grocery store and someone decides to come up and have an exchange, or two someone's come up and have an exchange. So for me, I focus in that area where, some focus in that is okay, but that also helps me decide what I want to do and how I want to train in all of those areas. So hopefully that helps answer that question and clarify it. Any
Awesome.
final thoughts, Coach?
Well, I all of that is awesome, and I also think don't feel bad if you love jujitsu or catch wrestling or whatever. Specialize in that. It's okay to like doing fetal facing away and do the skeletal alignment and be able to lay there and deal with the pressure and train those areas that you should do that. But don't get deluded into thinking that that is the whole game. Like Alan was saying, that's a thing you should do. You should train all of these areas and drill the crap out of them and test them, with resisting opponents, various levels of resistance that are still fun. So you're going to do it a lot so you can get those reps. But make sure that you're not getting caught in the trap of thinking, I have solved it, because you haven't. Something's going to come up that you have never seen, or it's going to be more pressure than you've ever had to handle, and you will fall apart. You will hit the thing that you're like, oh man, like he did with the two guys. Like, I didn't have the answer for that. Everybody gets those. I've had many, many, many of those. But don't let it crush your ego. Because it's like, oh crap, man. Hopefully it's not a real life situation where you get, really messed up. But I mean, in training scenarios, you need to do that, to put yourself in those situations to where, oh, I never thought of that. But don't feel bad if you want to. You're not going to solve all the situations in every class, every training. Go to class. Today we work these things. Today we work these things, and then you can say, okay, well, but you make sure you put on your training gun or use your training knife, or even a sparring knife, whatever, and go, okay, now there may be a possibility that he has something on him or he's got something concealed, and we're going to work on that for a little while. Or you can have the knife out kind of drills. Like the SIOCs like to talk about. I trained in that for quite a while. Years ago, they had the feeder-based mentality. That's what they called it. Alan talked about he doesn't like self-defense. It's more like, I would say, counter-offense. Their term for that mentality was feeder-based. That like you are. And this is back to OODA loop mentality. It's like if you're ahead of, Alan says ahead of time, if you take the initiative. I'm controlling this. I've kept my composure. The thing happens, and then you're dictating what's happening as much as possible. You're never going to have it all the way because you can't control every variable. Stuff's chaos. Stuff happens. But embrace the suck. Be okay with, shit, I don't have all of this solved, but I've done enough to where I'm going to probably come out of this okay. And you don't always. Sometimes you're on the bottom of the pile and you don't win. And hopefully it's not a permanent one. You know, hopefully you don't get caught in that scenario. Hopefully you've read it enough to where you don't get caught in that, but sometimes you do. Sometimes you don't make it. And but
Oh,
but
I've
what's
died
that?
quite often.
Oh yeah. I mean, I get smashed, you know, that you know, you get into a room, you know, that's why I love the grappling part of it so much, because it's a relatively safe way to get into that state. You know, with you start putting MMA into it. MMA is not the same as grappling. The MMA is fighting. Grappling is grappling. You're like, yeah, we're rolling, cool, it's great, and it can be really hard. You know, you can get slammed and all those kind of things. It's really difficult. You can get submitted. As soon as you start punching and elbowing, and you just get punched in the face once while you're on your back. You think you got the best guard, and someone punches
Wonderful
you right.
experience.
Yo, yeah. And someone drops one right on your face while you're in the guard. Oh boy. You start forgetting stuff really quick.
Amazing how that happens.
Don't dilute, but train. It's okay today we're doing grappling, you know, or today we're just doing kickboxing. We're not going to the ground. And then you start mixing the things up. Play with those things, have fun, and don't take it too seriously, because this is serious stuff. It can be, but you won't train it if you go to the dark too much. It'll be a negative thing, and try not to get caught in that trap. You don't want to go into it. It's not attractive. You won't want to go to it. And the whole point is to train these very difficult things in a kind of an easy and fun way, and then you'll do it a lot, and then you'll get pretty good at it, which gets you where you want to be, but without, you know, crushing your soul in the process. So I'm not sure if that answers it, but it's my approach to it. It's kind of positive, and I think you can become an old person still doing this stuff with that method. You know, it's more going to the light, you know, side of it without getting pulled into it, and then you become or quit. You become like a weirdo, or you quit, and you don't want to get caught in either one of those things. Just, hey, you can still be a good guy. You can be a good person, and it's great. And I love martial arts. I will do it for the rest of my life. Like, it just, I will never stop doing this. I love it. It's great. It's the greatest thing ever. It's my whole life. So, and everybody can do it.
Thanks, Coach. All right, guys, that's going to be it for the day. If you found value in what we did, do me a favor and like or subscribe, give us a follow, so you'll get additional notifications in the future when we do this again. And please share us with your friends. It helps us grow.
And please visit sifuallenbaker.com for more.
Thanks, guys.